Elijah McKinnon is an award-winning strategist, entrepreneur, and visionary from the future, currently residing on planet Earth. They are a co-founder and executive director of Emmy-nominated web TV platform and nonprofit Open Television, also known as OTV. Over the past decade, they have worked tirelessly to create brave and equitable spaces for intersectional communities to thrive. Through various nonprofit and grassroots initiatives, Elijah has raised over $10 million towards amplifying the lived experiences of people marginalized by the market and society. They are constantly moving and shaking in an attempt to build and share resources that uplift their commitment to intersectional media, human rights, mental and behavioral health, HIV education, and more. Thank you so much, Elijah.
Thank you. Oh, I love this. This is great. I'm going to feed off of your energy today. So I love to just ground us with a little call and response. I'll invite, if you feel good. Do you feel good? Yes. If you feel good, I'd love for you to respond feeling great. So feeling good.
Feeling great.
Feeling good.
Feeling great.
Feeling good.
Feeling great.
Oh, I like that. Okay, hold on to that for me. As our beautiful, beautiful Farah introduced, I am Elijah McKinnon. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the co-founder and executive director of OTV, and I'm so happy to be here today. Today in this space, you can just call me the executive diva, okay? It's gonna just to, minimize, bring us, ground us, right? We're talking about building just pathways, and we have some really beautiful comrades and friends here today, and something that I often like to think about when we're in these spaces and they're talking about these really big ideas is like, yesterday's problems don't need to be solved today, right? Like right now. But we are going to open a portal where we can maybe edge at getting to some of these learning curves, to unpack some of the ways in which we explore these definitions, and maybe walk away with some new wisdom. Does that feel good? Yeah? Okay, now that we're grounded in anchor, I want to give us a little roadmap before I introduce our friends. We're going to unpack the ways in which we are building, right, just pathways and what that looks like, which I'm really excited about. And then we're going to explore and maybe open up the ways in which care continuums can exist, right, to get closer to those just pathways. And then we're going to round out with maybe a little bit of a call in for the here and now. Like, what are we doing in the moment that we're in this space? And without that, I'm going to introduce our new friends, new and familiar, which I love the most. Chanelle Elaine is a social impact producer working in community with filmmakers, storytellers, and activists dedicated to cultural and social transformation. Chanelle is the founder of Creative Bionics, Kashif Incubator, and Kashif Production House, all doing vital work to design new pathways into filmmaking with emphasis on equity and inclusivity. To the left, Terence Nance is an artist, musician, and filmmaker born in Dallas, Texas. His work traverses many spaces and formats, often serving as a portal towards healing, curiosity, and one of my favorites, interdimensional exploration. Earlier this year, Terrence's first solo exhibition, Swarm, opened at the ICA Philadelphia, where he invited guests to settle in while he shared an immersive glimpse into the creative universe that informs his approach to making work that moves beyond the confines of genre. Moving over to the left, we have Alexandra Lazarowich. I did that. Yeah, I did. Alexandra is an award-winning Cree filmmaker originally from Northern Alberta, Canada. She is one of the co-founders of Cousin, a collective that supports Indigenous artists expanding traditional definitions and understandings of the moving image by experimenting with form and genre to ensure that their work is made, seen, and shared. And last but definitely not least, we have Brian Anthone.
Nailed it.
Yes. Brian is a creative executive at Inevitable Foundation, an organization focusing on helping disabled screenwriters reach their full potential commercially and creatively. He is currently charged with leading the organization in its industry-focused programs, including the concierge service and script development for their soon-to-launch production company. This is where you clap for my new friends. Yes. Okay. Now that we have that lovely introduction crafted by myself, I really, really want to just get into it. Do you want to get into it? Let's get into it. So I want to recognize and uplift and celebrate all of the wisdom that is entering into this room, right? On this space, in this space, and all around us. And as we start to paint a larger, picture for the ways in which we want to anchor our conversation today, I want to invite my comrades to share some of the reflections to the following prompt. And any ways that are coming up for you, that you are feeling called into this space to activate. What does a just pathway look like in the film and media landscape, and how does your work bring us closer towards interrogating, dismantling, or possibly even reimagining our current ecosystem? Anyone feeling called?
I just wanted you to say it one more time.
Of course. What does a just pathway look like in the film and media landscape, and how are you possibly interrogating it, reimagining it, or even possibly dismantling it from your work, your perspective?
I'll jump in on this one. All right, so a big portion of the work that we do at Inevitable, we have to acknowledge the specific challenges that disabled creatives are facing, right? And the intersectionality of these challenges, okay? So when you look at the media landscape as a whole, one of the big things we have to acknowledge is the fact that it's not created for everybody to be able to succeed whenever you look at the fact that so much of this work is being done for free and on spec, right? So historically speaking, that leaves out a massive portion of people who are able to participate in that system. So one of the things that we're aggressively looking at is figuring out how can we step in and create a new model for this? How do we create a system that allows creatives to be compensated for their work, not just financially, but emotionally and spiritually as well. Because we believe that that's the kind of support that will allow them to be able to not just thrive within these systems, but to gradually be able to create new systems.
I love that, and I feel like it definitely echoes some of the work that takes place at Kashif and just all around a lot of the work that you're involved with, Chanelle. I'm curious if you want to kind of hop in.
Sure. And as I do that, I just want to uplift, I think, what all of us were talking about a little bit earlier in our deep gratitude for the organizers of BlackStar who have been working tirelessly to put this film festival together and to bring us here and bring us all here together. And also just acknowledge all of us as our collective that we are right now. And that knowing that it took a lot of sacrifice for us to be in these chairs as we are right now. And that is really very connected to a just pathway, right? That just pathway of acknowledgement of our own humanity and how we need to show up and be in spaces and giving ourselves and each other the latitude and the space to be able to just stretch within that. And to take time in that. And to bring love into the space. Because we're not operating from a capitalist paradigm. We're operating from a collective. We are not operating from scarcity. We are operating from abundance. And that is what our just pathway looks like in film and media. We're not looking to any other spaces to find our justness and our justice. It is right here, right now. And we are creating that ecosystem that has been created before us and before us and before us, and we keep putting in and putting in and putting in, and it just keeps getting more just and more just and more just. Yeah.
I know that's right. Yes, please make some noise. Thank you. I really also love that you provide texture for the ways in which we have to often sacrifice, right, to get towards a just pathway. And I'm so happy that you called that in here, because I think as filmmakers, as artists, as storytellers, there's always so much that we have to sacrifice. And in this space, when we're talking about a just pathway, we're not releasing, right, the things that we know to be true that we need, right, in this space. In this space, we do need more opportunities for us to come together, hold each other, create moments of sacred communion, right, so that we can establish and hold on to the collective power in the room and then go out, right, into the world. So I really, really love that. Thank you for providing that texture into this space. I'm wondering, Alex, if you... Yes, we're going to be besties. It's going to be great. If you have anything to add.
Yeah, I think, what we're talking about today is sort of reflective of the reason we started Cousin Collective, which I am one of 4 co-founders of, and that was specifically to create a space to give money to Indigenous filmmakers, but artists. And I think when we talk about just pathways, I think one of the things us as co-founders found coming up in the industry was that a lot of Indigenous people are from remote places, often live in poverty, often don't have the same opportunities to access of, spaces, beautiful spaces like this, film festivals, even specific tools like cameras or computers. And so when we were coming together to create Cousin Collective, we thought one of the most practical thing that we could do was to give money to people for what they needed the money for, and that it wasn't tied to a delivery of a film or a delivery of a report or sort of all of these things that in like the wider space of giving development money or creating art, you're sort of demanded to make something and give something back to the people who have given you the money. And so a big part of what we wanted to create was a place where people could come to us, and sometimes it's we need a camera, sometimes it's I want to make a film, sometimes they need to pay their rent. And these are big life things that happen to people where, your grandma passes away, you have to attend a community ceremony, and you have to travel back to a very remote place that's very expensive to get to. And we found that a lot of people in the Indigenous community just didn't have access to that type of funding. And so we really wanted to step in to bridge the gap, because then it allows Indigenous artists to create through their lived experience, but also allowing them to be who they need to be and who they need to be within their own community. And so we really thought of it as a way to offer something very different in the landscape of what we consider sort of artistic funding, and what we try to continue to honor and do today with all of the grants that we give to artists who apply to our fund.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think something that's really coming up for me is like this constant battle between art and commerce and the capitalist underpinnings that are within trying to cultivate a balance, right? Because like, no one talks about this, but maybe there isn't a balance, right? Like maybe they don't need to go together, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that, doing art is a privilege for most people, and it comes with a lot of, I'm a really privileged person to sit here with you guys and talk about this. I'm a really privileged person because I've received funding from large funders to make the films I want to make. And for a lot of people, they just don't have the opportunities to do that, or actually don't know the pathway to get to those opportunities. So we really saw ourselves as sort of like our own little mini collective trying to support artists that could sort of be from the ground up.
Yeah, I'm actually really curious, and this is just opening up. I mean, it's kind of off script because that's me, but as we talk about this kind of art and commerce, and I think, Terence, if you want to jump in here, you're more than welcome, or, whatever offering you have to any of the spaces that have been called in here, I'm really thinking about how, Brian, you brought up, and, Alex, you're touching upon this, but like how a lot of these dynamics are quite intersectional, right? Like you're talking about the ways in which people are showing up as art makers, as storytellers, as people who are, giving so much of themselves, right, to the stories that, oftentimes entertain us and, hopefully push us a little bit beyond that wonder and magic and to action or exploration. And I'm curious about maybe any of the lessons, right, or learnings that maybe you're taking away in real time from your work or even outside of it that bumps up against this or challenges this art and commerce conversation, or anything that is coming up for you that feels like, a direct conflict, right? And how the work that you're doing or the work that you are seeing be done through an intersectional lens is actually is what is going to get us past whatever, ecosystem that we're in right now.
One thing that comes up for me in the phrase just pathways, I think the word pathways and the kind of fractal nature of all the many ways that we arrive at channeling through something, that energy comes up for me. And especially, the primary pathway being between any given artist and the creator, or, wherever they receive from, and the work it takes, sacrifice it takes to constantly maintain that pathway, how that's quiet work, is almost always invisible other than in the thing itself. And you can kind of get a feeling of what it took to keep that pathway clear. So I think about that and how everybody has a different maintenance process, and how it's always hard to talk about, what those are. And also something you said about the commerce aspect, art and commerce, or the intersectional, inconvenient strangeness of all that. Just made me think about being a kid and you just assume there's somebody out there among the elder sphere that has the path. Right. That that looked kind of like my path, for me when I was younger it was Steve McQueen. I was like, because he's like an art world, he's an artist, and then he made a film, and then, both of them, how he expressed in both places was amazing, or uncompromising in some sort of way, but, it felt legible. But then when I actually started trying to do the thing, I realized there, it's like lightning. The path of lightning doesn't ever happen again, but it's still always lightning, but you never see that, So I think that the pathways, the plurality of paths, especially in the kind of fable of how movies are made, where it's like, you have a great idea, and then somebody with a whole bunch of money, or even a little bit of money, or a community with money comes and resources that idea, and then it's just never the same, and figuring out how to approach, especially the resourcing of it. The biggest thing for me is just constantly turning to ritual, to make sure that that's the space in which consultation is happening, as opposed to on the strictly human realm.
Thank you so much for that beautiful offering. It's a stunning and delicious layup for where I want to take us, so thank you for that. But I want to call in a couple of things. I know I like to have fun. Are you feeling good, feeling? I don't know about it. Are you? Feeling good, feeling?
Great.
Oh yeah, that was it. I like that, felt that one. Something that you brought up that really just brought up a visceral dynamic in my body is maintenance, right? And the ways in which, in order to hold that navigation or that pathway clear, you have to be able to be in a space, right? As Alex said, that comes with a lot of privilege, right? To be able to say, I need these particular things. And then beyond just making the declaration, being brave enough to advocate on how that actually shows up. And so I'm really curious as we shimmy on to this next delicious part of our conversation, which is something that I think is really important for us to be talking about, especially as it relates to a global, landscape of filmmaking, as it relates to, the ways in which so many laborers right now, right, are specifically advocating and pushing back on the narratives that say, hey, I don't know maybe what the exact solution is, or maybe I have a couple of options, right, that we can review, but I know that the current one that we're in, it's definitely not working. And a lot of that is around defining a continuum of care, right? How do we actually do that in the real time? And so when I think about this, one thing that comes up to me is the fact that, the only thing that is constant, right, is change. And so right now the media ecosystem, right, the filmmaking ecosystem is on the precipice of great transformation, hopefully.
It is. It is.
We're manifesting,
Yeah.
right? This is a portal
Let's
we're
hope.
opening up, right? We're hoping that there's transformation. There is, yes. Thank you, Chanelle, for bringing that in. And I'm curious if you want to take us in like a brief kind of example or moments, and I know we kind of talked about this on our call a couple of weeks ago, but if you want to ground us in some of those like really tangible ways that your work or the work that you are witnessing, right, is providing a continuum of care so that, artists, laborers, storytellers are actually able to be supported, right, and beyond the function of their labor, right, beyond their export for production. I'm really, really curious around those little pieces that you're coming into close contact with that I think create the ripples for us to see the transformation.
I think at the, zooming out for a second level, both of the things that Terence and Alex kind of contributed to this conversation kind of really speak to this dynamic that I think is really something that can work on a large scale. So whenever you look at this whole conversation of each pathway is very specific, there isn't really a one-size-fit-all solution. At the same time, listening to what Alex said about providing care and resources for what people need them for, right? So what that means is we can't step into this from a prescriptive mindset, okay? One example of one of the things that we've done at Inevitable with the writer strike going on, a big part of our work kind of shifted towards how can we find ways to support these writers that aren't our traditional avenues of helping them get meetings, helping them develop material, right? So after the first week of the strike, one of the things we kept seeing online was there was one of the strike locations that the closest wheelchair accessible restroom was like 1.5 miles away. And the thing about that, it's such a little thing, but it's one of those things that we see that, and for us, it's not a little thing because we realize we're working with a community of artists who is so eager to participate alongside their peers. So one of our co-founders, Richie, he years back had made a random connection with somebody who owned one of the wheelchair accessible portable restrooms that they sanitize after every single use, called that person, got them to donate a day's use of that. They also brought out I think 40 or so folding chairs. And while we're out there, that's the thing that we got the most feedback on, was people saying, oh, wow, all of these other sites that we'd been to didn't have places for us to sit that were in the shade. So those are the kinds of things that we realize, there's a place for us to actually step in and support these creators in a way that isn't prescriptive of us telling them what they need. Right. And the other one I want to highlight, it was a couple weeks back in LA. We're in the midst of just not fun heat. Right, I think it was 98 to 101 degrees in the valley for a week and a half straight, right? And a lot of the lots or a lot of the studios are in the valley. So one of the things we decided to do was we ended up ordering a bunch of the these cooling towels, right? You pour water on them and then you spin them around and they cool off. So we just ordered a bunch of those, set up a pop-up cooling station outside of the Disney lot because we knew that was just going to be something that, especially whenever you're working with writers with disabilities, that's not you can't have this expectation that they're going to be able to stand in the heat for the same amount of time as their peers. How do we find ways to support them? And so for us, that was kind of a long-winded way of saying it, but it really is just how do we make sure that the ways that we're looking to care for people are really about a conversation with the people that we're trying to help, rather than us stepping in and saying, hey, I think you need this thing.
I mean, what I hear and what we're practicing through our work at Kashif Incubator is how do we meet people, ourselves, exactly where we're at, right? And, and this idea in social work around needle exchange and harm reduction. How do we reduce the harm that has been inflicted on communities that there is a white heteronormative expectation of how we're supposed to show up that we don't have to cop to. And that what that means for, the Brownsville Initiative, which is a 5-week filmmaking workshop that we do in Brownsville, New York, it means real simply we'll have food for you because we know you're coming from work to come to this workshop. We'll provide childcare for you because we know that people have children, and we don't have to be, American in the way in which we're going to take care of our children, who we are believing to honor as our elders, as our ancestors. We will provide transportation for you, right? We will do everything that we can to. And this isn't, there's not words here for this, right? This is vibe, and this is our actions. Our words won't do this. How do we create the safety so that when you walk into the room, you feel safe in a space that never wanted you to be in it in the first place, right? Because we're not in that space no more. But that's the mindset that we walk into, right? Because that's what was set up for us. But that's not here for us anymore. Right? And so how do we create that safety without words? Because I can tell you you're safe all day long and you're not going to feel safe, but how am I going to make you feel safe from here to there? From my heart to your heart, from my soul to your soul, so that when you come into that space, then you really get to be I can take a breath and I can imagine all of those stories that I wanted to tell. That is so I don't remember what the question was, but that's my answer.
It's a good answer. No, I think thank you for sharing that, because I feel like that's a big part of what we are attempting to do, is to give space for people to be creative by solving, whether that's financial problems for that they're taking care of, or even just having the supplies to do the art that they want to do. And I think there's just it is a thing when I was growing up, it's I have so much responsibility, right? There's a responsibility of my Indigenous community that I'm responsible for as a totality, then the larger Indigenous community that I'm a part of, then being a woman in an Indigenous community, which comes with a lot of responsibility, which includes helping to raise other family members within my family because of, disparities and cultural issues within our own communities that we're dealing with right now. And then to top all that off and be oh, well, I want to be an artist is there's very little breathing room to think creatively when I'm problem solving all of these other problems for my own community, within my own family, within my own individual relationships also. And so I think it's just one of the things of allowing people to have the space to be creative is actually the biggest gift. And I think the biggest way that you can show love and caring for somebody. And so I just that's a great statement. And I think that was what we're trying to do as a whole, and what I think of often in my own work. And that doesn't mean that I don't care for my own family and I don't take those responsibilities lightly, but it's just not the same for other people. And so I think being aware of that also gives me a breath to take a minute to just relax. Because I think we also hold ourselves up to other people, and that it's a competition, and that it's a race, and that I have to be at Sundance again, and I have to make a feature film, and sort of all of this the things that come with the things that you make. And it's man, but what else did you do within your community to show care for your family, for your mom, for your dad, for your brothers, for your sisters? That type of stuff is as equally as important as the work that you create. And I think come together to create something really beautiful when you take those two things and put them together at the same time.
Absolutely.
I love that. Oh my goodness. And I want to build a bridge between sort of everything that has been shared. Thank you so much, all of you, for this beautiful offering. I think something that's really coming up for me is something that a mentor, talked about, which is many years ago, this ripple, right, effect. And that, you mentioned it, Alex, that work is equally, if not the most important, right? What you do in your home, right, in your body and your life, right, is what other people see, right? They see that and they create a model for them to believe in, for them to access, and then for them to advocate for. And so I want to kind of build a bridge, Terence, to bring you into the space, because we've had so much being offered around the ways in which we can, advocate for other artists, right? Or advocate for other storytellers or people who are in, these seats or in these positions of decision-making power, right? That can say, we need to do this, or this is really important. But I'm curious, Terence, from your perspective as an artist, right? As a person who is, oftentimes making your work, right? How are you advocating, or what are the ways in which you want to bring into this space today, right? Any conflict, right, that has come up when trying to advocate, because I don't want people to leave here today thinking like, oh, I'm just going to go make these decisions for myself, right? There are literal powers, right, in place so that these particular systems and structures function this way so that we don't feel brave enough to advocate, right? And so that we don't even feel brave enough to form the possibility in our mind. And so I want to make sure that like we anchor and ground in some areas that are a little bit more rooted in practice. And so whatever comes up for you in that, I know, again, off script because me, but feel free to get brave with me.
Daily question that I ask myself for sure. The things that are coming up are, it's an anti-Black, anti-woman industry, period, and among all the other genocidal dynamics that are explicitly at play, and my 1.0 orientation to that was turn away, like we over here, we with us, what I mean? Like, and that solution, had a lot of usefulness for me, over the years, because I think that the people that I was privileged enough to work with, and that I'm still privileged enough to work with, I think shared in that oasis in a certain way. Chanelle and I made a film like 15 years ago, something crazy like that. That it was predicated. Like I think I told Chanelle at the time, like, this is totally from my subconscious. I don't even know what it's about, and it involves two people on a throne in the middle of an active street in New Jersey. Chanelle was like, bet, we doing it. You know what I mean? So it's like, that energy, that oasis energy, that level of trust that comes from being in the same turning away process, I think can kind of create layers of protection that aren't institutionalizable. And I think a lot of our projects and the projects here are kind of in awareness of that tension, that it's difficult to institutionalize the type of radical protection that we provide for each other, because it's necessarily, we ain't talking about it at a panel, we ain't, secret, you know what I mean? And it's more a vibe than it is an actuality in a certain way, and it's moving around. So I think that was 1.0, for sure. And I think the other thing that, in just the confrontation, when I realized that it's still coming into the oasis aggressively, and that I'm in the, constant interaction with, is that a part of it, the thesis of everything I'm making is to make it available in a larger way, especially with Random Acts. Part of the sort of stunt of it is that it's on broadly available television all over the world. Like, it's translated into Korean, it's somewhere and they can watch it, That's part of the stunt. It knows that about itself, right? And so, when we try to make something that is that oasis untranslated to that platform, the types of translation processes that are expected by the industry, when we don't do those, the answer is violence. You know what I mean? And that violence is carried out in the logistics, in the budget, in the time. Jen sitting here, right here. Jen is a director, one of the amazing director who worked on Random Acts, directed episodes on Random Acts, and we would sit there in disbelief, you know what I mean, of like the way that time is used to narrow our imaginations, and that how much energy we have to input to figure out in this sort of narrowing of time to still express. Because again, you know, that's where the violence is most active. So I think that there isn't an answer to that, but you know, to how you started this, like we're opening portals and trying to just think, knowing the answer doesn't have to be today. But one part of it is, how do I reconceptualize the whole project itself to be outside of that stunt of needing to feel available or feel like it is interacting with the film and TV industry, the media industry as it exists, knowing that it is collapsing, it is destroying itself, it has destroyed itself. It does not presently exist today. You know what I mean? It is not producing anything today.
Which is why, like, the work that we do in these spaces, right, to build this collective power, to go back into these spaces is so important, right? It's so incredibly enriching just to hear all of you think about this, right, and the ways in which you are. And I think just to kind of, you know, build a bridge between everything that has been offered and shared here today, when I'm working with artists and when I'm thinking about the ways in which we cultivate bravery, because I completely agree with you, Chanelle, like what is safe to me is not safe to the other person. And so it is a disservice for me to assume that I can prescribe that, right, to them and me, right, because I can't uphold those containers that are created. And then that is not setting up the other individual, right, to be brave enough to pull a stunt, right? And like, to be honest, like that's what's needed, is like a lot more people feeling that they are supported through a continuum to be audacious enough to advocate for what they want, right? And allow that to show up the way it was supposed to. My mom always had a saying, is okay, you know, Miss Patricia McKinnon, she had it down. She told me, right, don't be afraid, right, or surprised when greatness arrives at your front door. You must tell her to come on in and take off her shoes, right? Because we were expecting you. We had a plate for you. We knew exactly where you were going to be seated. This whole thing was orchestrated, right? And so I think so much about us getting out of like this system of like inequity and violence, as you mentioned, is about saying, okay, well, what else, right? Like, what are we going to be doing over here so that when we go back over here, they can't tell us no, right? Because we've seen it done another way. And that, to me, is so powerful and the perfect segue into the here and now. Do you like that bridge? Are we feeling good, feeling?
Great.
Yeah, so I like that. One more time. Feeling good, feeling?
Great.
Ooh, just because I like it. Feeling good, feeling?
Great.
Yes, okay. Yes, please do.
I just wanted to, you know, I've heard Elijah and we were talking in different kinds of ways around conflict, right? And I wanted to just make sure, because what I know, why I want to say this is because I know that part of our process, our collective process, our individual process, part of it that's the most difficult and the biggest conflict lies within me, right? Lies within ourselves. And, you know, we live with a lot of trauma, right? We live with trauma that came from inside. We live with trauma that came from schools and systems, and we just live with a lot of trauma. And what that translates sometimes to, for me, and you all can like identify if you do, is that like the language that I sometimes tell myself isn't very nice. I would never tell you the language that I tell myself, right? And that the way in which like I can create my own barriers to achieving what it is that I want to do is so prevalent. And that is the work. The reason I can sit in this chair with you all today is because of the work that it took for me to get through years of addiction, right? To get through the trauma of like a badass mother who took care of us and couldn't be there for us emotionally, but she was damn there for us financially to make sure that I could be in this stool today, right? That all of that language, that's where I have to start. That is the only way that I am going to be able to be effective in this collective, right? And my natural disposition is not to say, hey, how are you? I'm feeling good, my name's Chanelle. My natural disposition is to be in a corner and watch. That is my natural disposition. I have to push myself into the collective because the collective will take care of me if I take care of you.
Yes.
And I can only do that if I wake up in the morning at 5, I do my meditation, I read, I journal, I believe in a higher power, a God, a universe, a mother, like whatever it is, and take care of myself and move through my own negative language so that I can be here and share and find that creative sensibility about myself and get that piece of lightning. What? I was like, oh, no, he didn't say there's only one lightning. It go like this and it's gonna carry me and I just like love you all. I just wanna say that, right?
Love you too.
Yeah, the love is deep and mutual. Yes, yes. Thank you so much for this texture, Chanelle, because I think as we transition today, what I hear, and you said it so beautifully around language, right? And the stories that we tell ourselves versus the ones that we allow people to tell about us, right? They're oftentimes in direct conflict. And I think so much around this continuum of care is around the work that we are able to do on ourselves, right? And allowing ourselves the space that it is required to do that. And you may not have the answer, and you may not have all the tools today, right? As we soak up the wisdom that is in the room, can we just maybe take a little collective breath? Does that feel good? Go ahead, I invite you, if you're able to, just to firmly place your feet on the ground, palms up, no crosses here, allow the blood to flow, and go ahead and just take a nice inhale. And then a nice audible exhale if you're able. Yes, okay. I think language is a great way to button up our time today together. So I would love for you to think of a word. I'm going to prompt you. I'm going to invite some friends to meditate on some thoughts, dreams, questions that you have for myself or any of our comrades on the stage today, to kick us off and to prepare us for a little Q&A and conversation. I want to invite my friends here to provide an offering in one word. One word's hard, I know, but I like things that are a little challenging. I know, you know what I mean? It's just a little spice. It's just a little, a little spice. I know. It's also off script, which is everything has been today, which is great because this is how you make friendships. Not calculated, right? Not structured. Just vibes, as Terence mentioned. But if we're thinking about one word, right, that really sums up, that can be used as an offering today when we're cultivating out in the world, out in the streets, out on our sets, a just pathway, just to kind of come back to, right? One word that's like coming up for you that allows you to offer this, right? As like a whisper. And yes, I will be whispering all 4 of these words that are shared. So choose good words. Any word coming up for you? Alex, you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready. Okay, so I'd say kindness.
Kindness.
Because kindness to other people, kindness to yourself. And I feel like those are also words that I like to tell people, is to be more kind, because you never really know what's going on in other people's lives. And I feel like it's also something I've had to teach myself when dealing with my elderly parents, is to be kind to them, because they're growing old, and I'm very grateful that I get to be on the journey with them as they grow old and wise and deaf.
Thank you for that. Beautiful.
Yeah, exactly, and not admitting that they're deaf. Exactly, 1,000%.
One word coming up for any of our other friends.
I'm going to go with calm. And specifically because I know whenever we talk about these issues of broken systems or systems that aren't designed for people to succeed in, if you don't fit within this certain bucket, it can be so enraging, it can be frustrating, it can be like highly emotional. And so I think that just in service to ourselves and our own emotional well-being, making sure that we're taking the time to at least find these moments of calmness where we can actually treat ourselves as people and not just tools to dismantle a broken system.
Calm, kindness, Chanelle.
I'm going to go with believe. Because if we are believing as deeply in our every crevice of our bodies what it is that we want to do, and we can fake it. It doesn't have to, you can just say it. You can look in the mirror and be like, I believe in you, and cringe a little bit. But like in that belief, it is that belief that brings us to where we are and where we are going. The transformation is here. The transformation is here. The ecosystem is here. What we are doing is happening. I believe that. I believe that. So I'll go with belief.
Thank you so much.
Maitate. It's a Japanese word that I just learned recently, so hopefully, if anybody knows what it really means, please correct me. But from what I understand, it's I was introduced to the word in a gardening context, and it's the ability to see something as something else. So, for instance, seeing the horizon line created by a garden as the line created by a mountain formation at a horizon, being able to imagine a thing in its form as another form.
I love that. And such a beautiful way to begin our landing into this beautiful space. Just want to make sure I heard it correctly. Matate.
Maitate.
Matate. Calm, kindness, and believe. Yes, I'm enjoying both of those, all of those. Any thoughts, dreams, questions, provocations coming up from our friend? I see one question in the audience. Do we have a mic? We do have a mic. Look at that. Amplification.
Ooh, thank you. This is reoriented my interior for the day. Thank you so much. It's so very important. And I guess, I'm an OG in TV and film, and to hear y'all talk about how you're experiencing the same things with the same entities and the violence and how they use things like time and resources, and then how the solution or part of the confrontation is about going to the interior and taking a look at what you're dealing with and the trauma you're dealing with in the inner spaces. It's so clear to me that I guess I'm feeling a little bit of responsibility or lack thereof of having that conversation with people in the space who are younger than me. And so I'm wondering if we can, as a solution, start to build in intergenerational conversations about, it's not just about doing the work itself and the things that we're seeing, but also about doing that inner work that will shift the matrix.
Thank you so much for that offering. I'm gonna. Any thoughts that anyone?
This is something I've observed anecdotally. I think broadly my parents' generation and maybe the older end of my generation grew up with in the film industry specifically, aspiration towards assimilation that felt real. Assimilating into its modalities. And it's still there a little bit, And I think, just anecdotally, that's over. There's no aspiration towards any kind of assimilation to any modality of film production. And now it's kind of just like, all right, maybe we can get a check if we chill for a while we go do this over here, because there's no aspiration to it. Even if it seems possible, it doesn't feel like you can show it with your suit on and that'll be cool. You know what I mean? So I think that there's that I'm observing that like sort of tension and not to say it's as even simple as that binary, but I'm observing that.
Yeah, I want to thank you for lifting that, actually. The intergenerational, the intersectional, and just the ways in which, the white heteronormative patriarchal system wants to separate us, and what we get to learn from each other within our intergenerationalism. Is that a word? Intergenerational.
All language is made up.
Okay. Yes, they want to separate us so that we aren't learning from our elders, right? But we know better. We know better, and we are not only engaging in voices intergenerationally, but in the ways in which we are connecting and understanding that our purpose is still the same intergenerationally, and that what we all have to offer along that continuum is so beautiful. So thank you so much for lifting that.
Yes, thank you so much for bringing that into the space. I think something that just quickly came up for me is I had the privilege of working with young people. And let me tell you, young people will tell you so much about yourself. Oh my gosh, it's just what do you mean you know these things about the world? This is wild. But something that a young person once told me around this conversation that you just brought in here, which I think is critical, right, to the transformation in the matrix that we create, is a visual of a revolving door. Right, that the conversation should swing both ways, and that no one should feel like they have to lead, right? In a true conversation, there should be flow, and it should go back and forth until it needs to close, right? And I think that, again, young people, how? I was ugh. Took me all the way out, but brought me all the way back here to this space. So thank you so much. I would love to invite another thought, question.
We talked a lot about pathways kind of in and through, but I also wanted to know kind of exit strategies or things to take us through the industry and say, you know what, I'm done. How do I leave it? What do I leave behind? And, things that as we come to the end, we're all going to get old. We're not just going to stay here in the industry. So just some talk around how do we think about our exit from film?
Love that question. I'm planning mine right now, as we've talked about. So no, I love that. But I would love to hear any offerings on this side of the space. Also, no pressure.
I love that question, but the thing that immediately comes to mind is exactly what you just said about this whole passing along of knowledge and wisdom. And I think that because everybody's path is so different, that the actual mechanic of leaving the industry is one thing. But I think that in terms of thinking about what you can leave behind and the impact that you can have regardless of where your path has taken you up to this point, I think that's the real value, and that really does hold so much importance to be able to pass along. So that's just the first thing that kind of came to mind.
I think about, I saw an interview with Bell Hooks where she said something to the effect of, I needed someone to be about the job of archiving my life's work because it was that valuable, and nobody was doing it, so she created the Bell Hooks Foundation, whose mission is to archive her work. And, part of that made me really angry, that, this was probably from the early 90s or late 80s, this interview, maybe, that didn't exist. Even with the platform she had as a author, but I think that it's just a reality of envisioning your work outside of the time of a human life just requires some energy. And Valerie Maynard, who's an amazing artist based in Baltimore, recently made her transition. From what I understand, they're now about the process of cataloging and preserving her work. And I just heard a little bit about it. And Marilyn Nance and Ali Santana, amazing artists, are leading that process. And I just thought it was so beautiful that artists are leading that process, for an artist. So that kind of just put a little something in my consciousness, that's just a beautiful continuum.
Thank you so much for that, and thank you so much for this wonderful question. I think to land us gracefully for our time together. Something, I know it went by so fast. It's because we're all friends now, right? Something that I want to offer to you, my friend, is and something that I think to build a bridge between what has been shared is truly talking about manifesting legacy, right? Like, what does that look like in the here and now? When you think of an exit strategy, when you think of a departure, right? What does that look like 10, 15, 20 years from now? And I think so much of the way in which our society moves is quick and fast, right? As it has been for a long time. We don't really get the opportunity or the luxury to go that far, but we always have the opportunity to, right? So inviting that in and thinking about the ways in which we want to manifest legacy from a place of clarity, right, versus force, I think is such a beautiful way to close out our time today. Can we get some noise for these beautiful, wise, knowledgeable creatures? Keep the noise going for you all. Keep the noise going for my friend to the right. You can keep it going for me. All of our friends at BlackStar. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be in deeper community with you all and figure out how I don't think I can curse here, so I won't curse, but I always want to curse. I have such a potty mouth. It's bad. But how we can continue to build this portal, right, and many other spaces. Thank you so much, friends. Enjoy your day. Take care of each other.
Thank you for coming.
Bye.